Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to be doing a three-table PLO 10 live play video on sports betting on the Chico Network. And let's get right into the action. So I pick up decently connected middling hand on table 2 here, 7-7, 10-6. We see an open limper, and I'm going to label this player a recreational player. I'm not going to defend my big blind here. You'll see the action. The door is open to these two players, so they could potentially re-raise, and my effective odds are lower because of that. I don't think that's going to happen very frequently, but it is a possibility and one that makes calling less attractive. You'll see that I bought in for 40 big blinds at all the tables, and I am going to be topping up here in a second. It's slightly better to top up the hand before, after you fold, the hand before you're the button. So it's better to have more money in play when you're the button than when you're in the blinds. So not a very big deal, but it's a little edge you can have, especially when you're only playing 3 tables and you're not very likely to forget about it. One reason too that I prefer to start immediately with the minimum is that you may deem in certain game conditions that having a short stack is more profitable, or that the game isn't soft enough to justify putting more money on the table. And usually in that case you wouldn't play, you would leave. So if there's a few unknowns that you join the table just to profile them, to identify their play, then they turn out to be regs. It would have been better during that whole sort of scouting process to have less money at play, and to take less risk, to take less risk, basically. So we do have what look to be some pretty good games here. Some pretty soft players. And let's take a look at how that last hand played out. This process of hand review is pretty important, just to get better reads on your opponents and figure out how they play. So 2 pretty interesting things about that hand, which is that Mr. VIP 83 here limped what I presume to be a top 4% hand, and then limp called it against a pretty wild open razor here. And then also Mia checked back the river with the second nuts heads up. So definitely some atypical play, and I think the play in both these hands is strongly indicative of a certain type of personality. Extremely loose passive play, presumably only ever raised the nut style of poker. Obviously, we don't want to make too many assumptions on the basis of one data point, but just the way that hand played out, when calling pre, leading the flop here, and then Did he check the turn? Let's see the action. Presumably he was trying to check raise the turn here with initiative. Well, I guess he could have also been check calling. People do strange things. So potentially indicating maybe a little trickier of a player as well. Check raising the turn with the initiative is a somewhat uncommon play, I would say. But it is very important to not simply rely on your HUD to make reads on your opponents, because the information you get from your HUD isn't nearly as detailed as the information you can get from observing showdown hands. You can see that these games look pretty soft. There's all of these players seem very loose, and that's not an accident. The reason I joined these tables was because the games were good. Table selection, game selection, a very important part of winning poker. And you do want to be playing against loose opponents who are frequently going to end up with weak hands, weak situations on the flop, difficult decisions. That's a big edge. If you're playing very strong hands and your opponents are playing very weak hands. So definitely going to open on table 1. You can see that this player in the big blind 3 bets. 31% of the time he's a complete maniac, so there's a decent chance that I'll be able to get the money in pre-flop. Obviously, he might just call as well. But it would be great if he did re-raise and I could get essentially a committing amount in pre-flop. On this King Queen 6 flop with SPRs of 3, 7, and 6. I'm going to check fold. Table 2, I have top set on a board where it's going to be pretty common for somebody to have a straight. I am a 2-to-1 underdog against 6-7. So I don't really want to stack up against that hand. There's also not a lot of cards that turn me a full house. So there's 6 cards that make me a full house and 1 card that makes me quads. 7 immediate outs. I think this is pretty close between calling and folding. I'm just going to fold. As I said, I only have 7 outs to the turn, and we know 7 cards, so it's 45 remaining. So 7 to 38 is a ratio of 5.45 to 1 against. So getting 3 to 1 to improve, and being a 5.45 or whatever it was. They said dog. I think it's better to just fold. And this player did have 6-7, so saved myself 60 cents. I guess on table 3 I have to bet call. I could check call maybe. Seems pretty unlikely that this player would have checked like ace queen or whatever. So kind of unlikely that he would bluff the river. So I think the betting is the best play, and just try to get a crying call from an ace. Table 3, very strong hand here in the small blind. A hand that's going to play great multi-way. Table 2, I'm definitely going to fold to this through bet. This is the player who now the called 4-bet. Definitely some pretty interesting action here, but this is the player who limp called king, king, queen, queen. So I'm a little concerned for my hand against the sort of hands he would 3-bet limp re-raise with, in fact. And then he ends up folding. So table 3, just gonna go ahead and open pot here. Hopefully I can get in a raising war with the big blind, although he never 3-bets, so I guess that's not going to happen. And definitely going to check back this flop. He does look a little bit passive post-flop. Even if he wasn't on this board, I don't think there's much play in calling down, doing something crazy. Just a really, really bad board for my hand. And quite possible that he did defend and hit something pretty good. Overall, I am very pleased with the games on sports betting. A lot of great games, a lot of good action. PLO 10, PLO 25, PLO 50. A lot of great tables. So table 3, I'm just going to check. I think that raising is going to make it pretty difficult for me to show a profit. And I flop aces with the nut flush draw. And I'm just going to check call. I've got 9 nut outs and potentially some hidden outs too. I pick up. I've still got 9 nut outs because I lose the queen of spades. That's a pretty good run out. Still possible somebody has queens full, and I'm definitely going to bet fold, but I would try for some small value. Actually, I was in 3rd place there. Interesting too that this player took a very passive line with middle set open-ended in I guess it's still relatively deep 12 SPR scenario, but such a wet board, and with a flop better that is an extremely loose aggressive player. I think I would have preferred a flop raise there, although ended up working out, I guess. You got my river value bet. That was in last place. Let's check out the table, see if there's any more. Anything else going on? 3 tables is good anyway, so. You can see this player, Dangler 17, is on 2 different tables, so because of that, it's a little more important to try to get more detailed reads on his play. There's greater chance that I'm going to be involved in some pots with him, and obviously if I can get a good line on his play, then I'm going to be able to make better decisions in the hands that I play against him. So table 3, I complete the big blind, small blind, and I'm just going to check fold. Not a very good flop here. Table 1, check folding as well. I do have 4 nut outs and top pair, but if you think about the sort of hands that are going to bet the flop, I'm going to be in very bad shape. Getting almost 5 to 1, it is a lot more tempting to see the turn. So I'm going to call, do a backdoor hearts, And I'm not closing the action, which is a little unfortunate. So I think I'll just bet the turn. And pretty good run out. Obviously, King Jack did just appear. And I'm going to fold to the pot size river raise. Table 2, flopping deuces full. And I think it's a pretty clear just call. If one of these very loose players would call with a flush draw behind me, that would be great. And the size only half pot again. I don't want to lose these players if they're on the draw. And I don't want to lose this player if he's on the deuce. But unfortunately, everybody folds. What are you going to do? Rainbow aces on table 2. Kind of a tricky hand to play most of the time. The goal is basically to stack off pre or get like a committing amount in pre. It's not a hand that plays very well in a single raise pot or even a 3-bet pot where you don't get a substantial amount of your stack in. And I'm going to try to min raise here. This play basically never works. The hope is that somebody repots you. But these two players at the bottom did some goofy stuff earlier, so thought I'd give it a shot. I think it's a little bit transparent. People are going to start putting you on aces when you make this move. And definitely just going to check fold the flop here. 6-way, so pretty good chance somebody flops something pretty good. And I have no nut outs, so one pair of aces is not going to be enough to hang on. Table 2, picking up an okay rundown hand on the button, so usually this is going to be playable. I think I'll probably just call. My hand's not really that strong where I want to start shoveling money into the pot, and calling does prevent the 3-bet, one pre-raise. And I flop middle pair and the 3rd nut flush draw. But in a 5-way pot, I'm simply going to fold to a flop bet. It's just way too high a chance that I'm drawing slim or dead, especially if it goes multi-way. Really, you don't want to put a lot of value in a non-nut flush draw in a 5-way pot. It's a great way to lose a lot of money, calling, drawing dead, and then you hit it, and then you'll lose even more. So you do want to make sure that your draws in Omaha are not fairly nutted, especially mass multi-way like that. Table 3 is a little too weak of a hand to open first in 5-handed or in the MP middle position. Pretty bad hand structure. Yes, I do have an ace and a king, and I do have a nut suit, but there's so much disconnect between all my cards The most important thing in Omaha is that you have four cards working together. See on table one, my cards are much lower, but because it's a rundown, because I have such great connectivity, this is a much stronger hand. And I will be defending my big blind here when Omahalik 420, I think, should be Omaholic with an O, right? Raises. So I thought he was going to raise, but I guess he timed out before he could raise. So just going to check. And happy to see the flop for free. So I flop the nut full, great situation, and bet and take it down. I don't think that checking is that wise. Would be better against a total maniac who you could trust to bet air pretty frequently. But against sort of a looser passive guy, I think the better hope is that he has an 8 and plays it aggressively, or that he calls with like an overpair or 6-7 or something like that. So that's the highest reasonable expectation of profit. Table 3, happy to check my big blind here. We get a pretty interesting flop with 8 diamonds, and we can make a full house as well. Potentially a hand like Ace King would have us in a little bit of trouble. But we bet and take it down, so that's pretty sweet. And table 3, picking up a very nice rundown hand with no gaps and a queen high suit. So I might consider 3-betting this against Dangler specifically because he is a pretty aggressive player. So could be opening very wide. Now, if this tight player on the button were to raise, then I would just flat to keep Dangler in the pot. But given that we have a lay position limp from a very loose player, I think that raising's great. He would probably raise most of the time if he had a strong hand. So when he limps, he's got presumably hands that weren't strong enough to raise, but he still wants to play. I mean, it's possible that's not his strategy, but that's, I think, the most reasonable assumption. So raising becomes very attractive against those sort of hands, which probably underdogs to our hand and could potentially lead to some pretty good, pretty profitable spots on the flop. Our hand specifically is going to do very well against junkier hands of the same style that have gaps and lower cards, and it's going to play out pretty well. So you don't want to raise too much out of the blinds, but those situations where you have a very loose late position limper are sort of an exception to the rule of don't raise out of the blinds when you have the rule is don't raise it to the blinds, but when you have a pretty decent hand and you're against like a single late position limper, that's an exception to that general rule. Table 3, picking up a pretty premium hand, double suited, highly connected, and both suits working the right way. So you can see the player in the small blind, very aggressive player, although only a 12% 3-bet. Be kind of, okay, so we flop king high flush draw and a gut shot with an SPR of 5. Definitely sort of challenging situation here. I'm pretty sure I want to go ahead and check back the flop. If somebody has the nut flush draw, then this is a very troubling situation. And we are 5-way. only got 3 nut outs. I'm getting just under 5 to 1 to see the 6 to 1 to see the turn. Which I think it's close between call and fold. I'm very uncomfortable calling on a second nut flush draw in what was a 5-way pot. On the river, we make the second nut flush, but this card presents a possible full house. With such great odds, I do think I have to call. And take a note that this guy bet bottom pair in a 5-way pot, which is not generally an advisable play. So luckily that hand turned out all right. But if the turn bet was larger in that situation, I would have folded for sure. It was only the overwhelmingly compelling odds that encouraged me to continue. You really shouldn't place too much value on second nut flush draws in Omaha in mass multi-way pots. It's a definite recipe to lose money. Mojo Mike posting 10th of the game, but also coming with 100 big blind buy-in, so won't make too many assumptions about his play just yet, but watch and determine and judge. Maybe wait for the 20 to 30 hand sample before we start labeling him. It is important to label your opponents. I use a color scheme where yellow is fish, red is regular, green is whale. And it's important because, especially if you're 6 tabling, this will enable you to easily game select for the best tables and just save you time in general. So you do want to be playing the softest games. And actually these guys here, going to upgrade them to whale. It's not really a big deal if you have the fish labeled as whales or vice versa, because of course you do seek out games that have either player type. So another thing you want to do is seek out unknowns, especially if you've been playing at a limit for a while. Unknowns, there's a very good chance they are fish, but just to categorize them, even if they're regs, then you know what tables are less valuable because they're at them. So very important to label your opponents, very important to observe their play and take notes. Do they bluff? Do they go for thin value? Do they have any sort of atypical decision-making processes? Do they bet bottom pair in a 5-way pot? There's so many different observations you can make on your opponent, so many different play styles and just approaches to the game, the way they think about the game, and so many different tells, sizing tells or timing tells. So there's really no shortage of observations you can make about your opponents, and you really want to be paying close attention and taking notes and adapting to how they play. That's the essence of profitable poker. Do they bluff raise? See on table 3, get money 420 there, raise the flop, bet the turn, and bet the river. And it looks like he was bluffing. He could have had maybe a set as well, I guess, but he's saying he had a set, so it's possible too. Probably his opponent was like calling down with the straight already. But who knows? I'm not going to take too much, put too much focus on what this player says he had. I'd rather build my reads off my observations of showdown hands and by replaying the hand afterwards. People obviously can lie. Let's take a look at the lobby. You do want to scan the lobby every once in a while. Eventually I could do some table starting. This table looks okay as well. But we'll just stick with what we've got for now. Looks like kind of a dubious play there by Mojo Mike. We'll have to replay it. Queen 8, 6, 7. He does defend his big blind, which is a little too loose. And then calling down with gutty and on a flush draw turned. The turn call looks maybe okay. He's got, pair, double gut shot, weak flush draw, and the bet is only almost 1/3 pot, a little over 1/3 pot. River checks. But potentially he could be a bit of a looser player if he's making these a little bit dubious call downs. I mean, you're trying to do a 7-high flush. Yes, it's heads up against a very loose player, but still non-nut gutty. Table 1, already sort of an interesting situation. Hand's not that great, but I'm pretty tempted to take a flop here, even against Type Razor. We do have a couple of pretty loose callers, which makes it a little more attractive to get in the pot. Definitely going to be check folding here on the flop with bottom 2 and a gut shot. Flop gets checked around, turn completes a flush, time to check fold again. Table 2, kind of interesting maybe to complete for 5 cents if the button didn't raise. We have a very junky hand. The big blind's not the type of player who's going to raise a lot in that situation. And obviously we would be getting incredible odds to continue. We do have a king high suit. Obviously once the button makes the pot-sized raise against the field of limpers, there's no choice but to fold. It's not a close decision by any means. Table 1, regs on the button. Pretty easy fold. This hand is very weak. Disconnected, no nut suit. Just a very unattractive hand. Table 2, we get actually a much better hand. Nut suit, decent connectivity. And I think I'll be calling this raise. Neither of the blinds are so hyper aggressive, so pretty good chance we see the flop single raised. And I do end up flopping the second nuts, losing only to pocket 10s. And I'm going to bet the flop for half pot or raise if there's a bet in front of me. I don't think I want to slow play this boat in particular. A little concerning that Novik Me calls. But I think if they have 10 swell, you just have to sort of take your medicine. Not really any way to get away from this hand. And happy to take it down anyway. Presumably Novik Me had some sort of 9 there. He's showing a decent amount of strength to call a near pot-sized bet into a 5-way field. Presumably, Mia had like an overpair or maybe a wrap or something. Could call maybe. I mean, there's how many ranks are there? Look like maybe 7 ranks. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7 ranks. 9, I guess, because 10s and 9s are pretty good. So 2 to 1 basically ratio of ranks. Better than 2 to 1 ratio of ranks that I like. Actually, 10. So I only really dislike Jack, Queen, King. Not really too worried about the ace. So potentially could call as well if there's like a straight draw behind me. Obviously that would be great if Mr. VIP or Big Dog called on like Queen Jack. Even if the Jack, Queen, or King hits, it's not a lock that Novotny has it. Pretty much Novotny has to have the 9 here. Like, he's not going to call on a draw after this guy bets 5 ways. So given that he has the 9, Mia can't have the 9. And like, he's not going to call with like 9, 8, 7, 6, or even probably 9, Jack, Queen, King. Probably won't even call. But 9, 8, 7, 6, or like Jack, 9, 7, 6, or whatever. Definitely not going to call my raise. Whereas if the positions were reversed and the loose player had the 9, then he's very likely to call the raise. So I still think raising was a reasonable decision. I don't really want to give 2 players a free card that can beat me with this hand that would potentially get pretty expensive if somebody made a better hand. It's going to be a tough hand to get away from. Table 1, pretty weak double-suited hand on the button. Definitely just going to fold to under the guns, pot-sized open raise. Not really a hand you want to be calling raises with so many gaps, and it's just a very weak hand in general. And let's check the lobby again. Of kind of all right. Let's join this table. Before I sit down, I'm going to wait for my HUD stats to populate here and make the best seating decision, because it is 3-handed. So I do have the luxury of picking whatever seat I want. So you want the aggressive players on your left. Unfortunately, that's not really an option. This guy seems to be the most aggressive. I'd rather Fontanilli were sitting here and I could have this seat. That would be great. But it's not really a big deal. So guess I'll take position on this also aggressive player. Plus that might just get me right in immediately. Should be interesting anyway. If you've got a couple more loose aggressive players, might get some more difficult spots, some more interesting spots. And I am going to Just going to buy in here for 40 big blinds. You see that everybody else only has 40 big blinds, so I'm not going to defend this hand here. Table 5. Table 1, of course, being the replayer. Too many gaps. Pretty weak hand. So just going to fold it. And I'll probably fold here on table 5 if it's raised. It's not even that great a spot if it's folded to you in the small blind. Limp call, but you don't really hit the flop that often. So go for the check raise, I guess. And I do end up flopping the nuts, which is pretty exciting. See if I get some action. You're actually not much of a favorite against a flush draw with a straight in Omaha. The flush has like 40% to hit. Because of the effective removal of all your cards. Basically my ace and 9, so that was pretty sweet. You are a pretty good favorite with a straight against two pair, but like if you had like just king high hearts here, because my ace and 9 and 6 are all non-hearts, that makes compared to Hold'em, that makes the pool of outs to non-outs a more favorable ratio, so the percentage of hitting a flush in Omaha is actually higher than Hold'em. Max Men, 1999, joining the game. Looks like he posted under the gun and pot raised. Yeah, post and pot. You can see just the 4 hands we have on him. He's been raising all of them so far. And he doesn't disappoint on this 5th hand with a pot size 3-bet. So pretty good indication here that he's a bit of a maniac. Obviously, you can't make too many assumptions about how your opponent plays over basis of 5 hands. And I'll certainly look to be confirming this read. But won't be able to do so just yet. Pretty magnum aces here on table 1. And I'll definitely 4-bet if somebody 3-bets. I might 3-bet if nobody 3-bets. Pretty decent chances of flopping a big hand. Like, I would say I'm about a 2-to-1 dog to flop a pretty big hand. Flop comes Jack, Jack 5. The opponent checks back, so I'm going to bet. He still could have the Jack, like he could have been slow playing me. And I'm going to fold. Oh, nice hand. Table 2 here. I 3-bet a very loose opener, and I am going to check back the flop, turning a decent draw. Second call. I might have a 9 might be good. King of Hearts is probably a pretty good card, giving me the nuts. Not going to defend on table 5. Interesting that this player committed so much of his stack and then folded, so potentially it could be a bit of a bluffer. You would think if he had any sort of value hand, even like 3 of a kind or of course a lower straight, that he would call without too much hesitation. Let's see what happened here. Let's play with ace jack 6-7. That's very interesting. Okay, so he did have top 2 on the flop, but it's very interesting that he would raise this hand out of the small blind against a limper. That's not really a good idea. Like, this is a very weak hand, and you're out of position. And also, I think calling the 3-bet is a little dubious because the limp re-raise is so likely to be aces, and you do have an ace in your hand. But then, of course, bluffing top 2, no-brainer stack off. Table 4 here, 10-10, 8-6. Not really a great hand to open under the gun, so just fold it. I feel like the session's going pretty well so far. I haven't really been tested with regard to mental game issues. Has been running pretty decently, I would say. So the real test is when the negative variance just hits you like a ton of bricks, and how you handle that, whether you have the mental fortitude to play good in the face of adversity, or whether you crumble under the pressure. The mental game is such a big part of Pot Limit Omaha because it's a high variance gambling game where you are frequently getting it in, and usually not as like a massive favorite. And there are a lot of situations where the turn comes and it's just the worst card in the deck, and then you lose your stack. And definitely it can be helpful to play sort of lower stakes where you're not as affected by the money. So you can think a little more rationally about your decisions. You're not as bothered when you lose a pot, whereas when there's more money on the line, it can be tough. You go on a 7 or 8 buy-in downswing where you're making the right decisions, but you just keep getting coolered or outdrawn or a combination of all these things. And it's pretty easy to lose your mind, right? If you're playing like a 20 or 30 buy-in bankroll. So it can definitely be very helpful to play small stakes relative to your net worth. And pretty dubious stack off here with just a 7-high flush draw. So raise, and then a nice 3-bet, isolation 3-bet on the Maniac and a call. And on the flop, he's got very little equity here. Just basically running 2-pair, running straight, which is not going to happen very frequently. No money in PLO. All the whales are solid. So yeah, let's continue on here. Aces double suited takes down a 400 big blind pot. Okay, Caesar might be on a little tilt too. Let's see how this played out. Under the gun raise, 3-bet, 4-bet, 5-bet, all in. Seems pretty optimistic. I mean, this guy's not really the craziest, most loose aggressive guy in the world, 3-betting only 7%. And stacking off with that hand for 200 big blinds seems a little bit optimistic. Obviously, good play with aces double suited, kept re-raising pre-flop. Click the right button on that one anyway. I guess I'll end this video here. Should be some more StarCraft Global Finals today, so go check that out. I was about to fold here, but you can see I will fold now. You can see this guy, this reg, was all in for 61 cents, so pretty easy call of that all in. And table 3, just going to complete here against a loose passive player in the big blind. You can complete more liberally if you expect there won't be a raise. I flop top pair second kicker and just check fold. I don't know if that's the right play, but I don't like to pay off loose passives. They always seem to have me beat when I call them down, hoping I'm good. So hopefully you enjoyed my video. I'm going to go over it a little bit later and do some analysis on some of the spots that cropped up. Let me know what you think in the comments of the YouTube or of my blog, toppoker.zone. I'd love to hear what you think, or if you have any analysis of some of the situations or spots where you think I may have made a mistake, or there's an alternative play, or any suggestions on how I can improve my game. Always appreciate it. I'm always trying to learn and grow as a player. Strategy in PLO and poker in general, very complex subject, and there's always room to improve. So hopefully you did enjoy my video, and yeah, that's everything. Have a great day.